Okay, this is a pre-trip for the front of the truck, the engine compartment, the steering components, and the front axle. So we'll start at the front of the truck, and we'll go ahead and walk up and look and make sure that there's no leaks underneath the truck. Make sure that the lights are not cracked, broken, or dirty. And we'll just look at general things. We want to make sure that it's not leaning as well. We can also check the license plate as well. Then we're going to go ahead and open the hood. And we're going to go ahead and start on the passenger side, because then when we finish the engine on the other side, then the steering will be there and we won't forget. So on this side, we've got some hoses to look at in general, and we just say that they're not cut, split, they're securely mounted, and there don't appear to be any leaks there. And we can use abrasions, bulges as cuts as well, as far as terminology for condition. And we're going to go ahead and look a little bit further down here on the passenger side of the engine, and we can go ahead and see our alternator right here. And then we say that it's securely mounted. It is belt driven, because we can see the belt right there. Then we go ahead and talk about the belt. The belt is not torn or frayed, and it doesn't have more than a 1/2 to 3/4 inch of play. And we go ahead and talk about what's hooked to the back of it here with the wires. We make sure they're securely mounted, none of the wires are loose, and there's no wires exposed as well. Okay, and then on this particular engine, we'll go ahead and walk around to the other side, and we'll just start at the top and work our way down. We've got our coolant here is at the proper level, and if it isn't, we'll add some. We've got our oil dipstick here, and we'll check that for if it's at the proper level. If it's at the add mark, we'll generally put in 1 gallon. Okay, then also on this side, on this particular truck, we have our water pump right here, and it is securely mounted, not leaking, and it's gear driven. And it's we can also find the water pump by following the lower radiator hose, and that'll take us to the water pump almost every single time. And we'll go ahead and look at some more things here. We want to look at hoses in general again, and then we also want to go down and look, and we can kind of see our power steering reservoir right here. And we make, we'll make sure that it's full at the proper level, and then we'll check the hose to the power steering as well and make sure it's securely mounted, no abrasions, bulges, cuts, not leaking. And then we've got the fluids taken care of. And we're going to go ahead and we need to find the air compressor on here. And on this truck, it happens to be way back in here. So what we want to do is say that it is securely mounted, doesn't appear to be any audible leaks, and that it is gear driven, because it's obviously not near the front where the belts are. And then we're going to go ahead and go from here, and we just look at all the hoses in general. And on this particular truck here, this is a different one that we have. The air compressor is in a different spot. We can follow this line here. We can follow this line here, and we can find the air compressor in that way. So this one's kind of tricky to find, but if we go ahead and look real carefully, we can see it down in here. And that's what we need to say, is that it is securely mounted, and this one is belt driven, and it's no audible leaks as well. Okay, and then on the other side of the truck, sometimes, which we didn't mention before, and it gets a little confusing, but if we were to look at the passenger side, and there is a lower radiator hose like this, that'll take us to the water pump, which is actually in here behind the frame, and we can look at that and point to that and say that it's securely mounted, it's gear driven, and it doesn't appear to be leaking as well. So the only thing that varies a little are where the water pump and where the air compressor are, but the other things are pretty standard. So we'll go ahead and go from there, and then you can kind of see it back in there, but it's kind of hard to see. And then we'll go ahead and kind of review our engine before we go into the steering. We've got 3 fluids we talked about. We got 3 engine components we talked about: the alternator, the air compressor, and the water pump. And we talked about our hoses, belts, and wires, so we've got about everything we need on the engine. So then we can go ahead and go to our steering. We'll go ahead and look at our shaft here that is not bent, broken, or damaged. And then we'll go ahead and work our way down. We'll look at our U-bolts, U-joints I should say, and they're not broken or damaged. There's no debris in there. And we'll just keep working our way down the steering components. And we've got, as we go down here, this big box is actually our gearbox here. And this looks like it's not leaking, it's secure, and it doesn't look like any of the bolts are missing. Then we'll go ahead and move on down to our pitman arm, and this is the top of it here. Then we want to make sure these nuts and bolts are secure, they're not missing. And we'll go ahead and work our way down the pitman arm a little bit, make sure it's not cracked, broken, or damaged in any way. Down we go, and then we want to make sure that this nut and this counter key, or this castle nut and counter key, are securely mounted in there, and they're not loose at all, because if that comes off, that could affect our steering, which could cause major problems. Then that is connected to the drag link here, and it's not securely mounted. I mean, it is securely mounted, it's not cracked or damaged, and it doesn't appear to be loose in any way. That is securely mounted to the upper control arm, and that is, there does appear to be a little bit of a leak right there, but other than that, it doesn't appear that there's any problems there. Then we also have our tie rod, which ties the steering from this side to the other wheel, and that's securely mounted, not bent, broken, or damaged. So then when we're done with the steering, then we can go ahead and look at our suspension. So depending on what you have for suspension, we'll start here, and we'll do our leaf springs to start with, and we'll just go ahead and talk about, if I can find it here, we'll talk about, there's actually 4 parts to the leaf springs. We'll start here. We'll start at the front. This is the leaf spring front hanger, okay, right here, and that is securely mounted. None of the nuts or bolts are missing, are they? Then we'll just talk about the leaf springs themselves. They're not broken, scissored, cracked, or damaged in any way. And we'll just work our way back. And we've got our U-bolts here, and they're securely mounted. None of the nuts are missing underneath. Okay. And then we'll just go ahead and keep working our way back, and we can see that the back spring hanger back here just a little further. There we go. The back spring hanger here is securely mounted. None of the bolts are missing. So that's the 4 things we need to mention on all these springs. And then we'll look for some more suspension items, whatever there is. If there's an airbag, talk about it. This particular truck, we've got a shock here. We want to say that it's securely mounted and not leaking. If there is a leak, make sure you mention it, because you want to get the point for it that way. Okay. And then from there, we'll go ahead and go into our brakes. So we'll start with the brake hose, and it's securely mounted, no cuts or splits, and it's not leaking. Then we'll go ahead and look at the ABS line, which it's electrical and there's no wires exposed and doesn't appear to be damaged. And we'll go ahead, and those hoses lead into the brake chamber, which is right here. We want to make sure that this clamp is secure and everything is securely mounted and there doesn't appear to be any leaks. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the back of the brake chamber here, where the slack adjusters are, and we want to make sure that it's not bent or broken or damaged, and all these pins are in place and they're not broken or missing. And also, if you could move it, if the brakes were released and the wheels were chocked, it shouldn't be able to move more than 1 inch this way when you pull on it. Now, another way to look at it is to see that this angle here and this angle here, this is kind of hard to see because it's at it from behind it, but if you looked at it from over here, the angle, if it's 90 degrees or more, it's good. If it's a little under, it's not. We need to get it adjusted. Okay, so that's the 3 parts so far. We've got 2 more we need to talk about. On this particular wheel, you can't really see the brake shoes and the brake drums because there's a cover right here that kind of covers it up. But you still need to talk about what you could see when you look inside the side glass or the hole there. And what you need to mention is the brake shoes are not too thin, or most companies say 1/4 inch or more, and they're not cracked, broken, or missing. And then the drums aren't cracked or broken. There's no debris there, and that also there's no bluish color from somebody riding the brakes coming down the mountains. Okay, then we'll just kind of work our way out from there, and we'll just go to our tires. Now there's three things we want to talk about the tires. We can talk about the condition here, that it's evenly worn. We can talk about the depth, that it's on the front tires it should be 4/32, on every other tire it should be 2/32. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the overall condition of it. It's evenly worn, there's no abrasions, bulges, cuts, there's no seem to be any excessive wear on it. And we also would check it excuse me, with a mallet or a gauge, and if we did use a gauge we would make sure that the valve stem is securely mounted, not leaking, with no cap missing. And then we're going to go ahead and work our way in there, and we'll just talk about the wheel itself here, or the rim, whatever you want to call it. There's no chips or dents here, so that it can hold the bead to the tire, and then there's also no cracks or illegal wells on the rim in general. Then we'll go ahead and go into the lug nuts themselves. Now, there are a few signs of looseness. Make sure they're not missing, number one, but then number two, if there's rust trails coming out or graphite trails on aluminum, that kind of in this direction, that means that the lug nuts are starting to loosen up. Another thing, that if these nuts were to start coming off, then there'd be shiny spots on the bolts underneath. Another thing that you want to check for wallowing inside of the wheel, that kind of wears it out, and go from there. So the lug nuts are present and they're not damaged or signs of looseness. And we go to the hub cover and make sure that it's not cracked, broken, damaged. There doesn't appear to be any leaks. If it was the kind of rubber seal that you could take off and replace, or not replace, but fill in if you needed some oil, it is 90 weight gear oil for the most part, just so you know that. And that basically is your front, your engine, your steering, and your front axle for the pre-trip inspection. Hope this helps you. Thank you.